2.4, more on slope preparation. Parallel, x plus 2y is equal to 4. Perpendicular, x plus 2y is equal to negative 6. 2x minus y equals 6. Okay, so parallel, perpendicular have to do with the slope. So you need the slope. So when the slopes match, we will say they are parallel. So this is an example of what they look. You know visually what parallel looks like, but algebraically the definition in this case is going to be the slopes are equivalent. So the slope of the first linear equation and the second linear equation have the same slope, and therefore they are parallel. The second one, you know what perpendicular looks like. You have a 90-degree angle right here, right? And because, okay, so that's kind of graphically what it would look like, right? But algebraically, we would say it's negative reciprocal, or that the product of their slopes is equal to negative 1. And that's how we would find out these are, in fact, perpendicular. Okay, so we got a visual idea of what they look like, right? So again, these slopes are equal. So we could call this, for instance, of the first equation, we could call this, slope 1, or m1. So in that case, it'd be negative 1/2. And in this case over here, we could call this slope 2, and therefore this would be like, m2. And then we say negative 1/2. And negative 1/2 is equal to negative 1/2, so check. These are, in fact, parallel. Let's try the second one over here. So visually, we can already tell that the second rectangular coordinate system, that's perpendicular. But let's see what that means. We would know that perpendicular is if you took slope 1, right, which we'll say in this case is the negative 1/2, and we'll say slope 2, which in this case we'll say that's m2 and that's a positive 2. If we multiplied m1 times m2, the slopes together, the slope from the first equation by the slope from the second equation, we should get a negative 1 if it's perpendicular. So let's see if that's true. So we have negative 1/2, and we multiply it by a 2, which is understood to be over a 1. And in fact, we got a negative 1, so we know they're perpendicular. You basically just have to memorize the test, right? So parallel, their slopes are equivalent. Perpendicular, the product of their slopes is equal to a negative 1, or to put it another way, they are negative reciprocals of one another, right? You kind of see that you could flip that, right? So you flip these two numbers, but not just you flip those though, but you also flip the sign. So one was positive, one was negative, right? So negative reciprocal. Okay, let's try a couple more. Slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines. You just have to memorize these definitions. So decide whether each pair of lines is parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Now, the problem comes in that most of the time they're not going to give you the slopes. So if you know parallel and perpendicular, their definitions are dependent upon the slope of the equations. You know that the first step is going to be you need to find the slope of the equations. So until you have the slopes, you can't determine whether they're the same or whether or not the product is equal to negative 1. So first step, determine the slope. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the slope intercept form. Intercept. Okay, and that form is y is equal to mx plus b. So we basically solve for y. That's how we get this. Okay, so let's solve for y. So minus x. These cancel out, leaving me 3y equals negative x plus 5. And then divide by 3, divide by 3, divide by 3, cancel. Y is equal to negative 1/3 x plus 5/3. And now we know that the slope of the first one, the first equation we have here, is equal to negative 1/3. Okay, what's the slope of this other one? Well, we're trying to get this negative 3x. We're trying to get the y by itself, so we need to get rid of this negative 3x here. So we do that by adding 3x, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Those cancel out, leaving me y is equal to plus 3x plus 3. All right, so we got rid of the negative 3x by adding 3x. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Okay, now at this point, we would say slope 2, the slope of the second equation, is equal to 3. And we can even put it over a 1 for comparative purposes. Now, we know they're not equivalent. Obviously, negative 1/3 is not equivalent to 3. But what happens if we multiply these together? Do we get a negative 1? Right? Now, without cancellation, I did cancellation before, but let's say we don't cancel. Let's say we're not comfortable with cancellation. That's okay. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. 3 times 1 is 3. Negative 3 divided by positive 3 is a negative 1. Check. This is actually perpendicular. perpendicular. Okay, so let's try this one over here. Now, again, we can't determine whether it's parallel, perpendicular, or neither until we determine what the slope of the individual equations are. So first one is 4x minus y is equal to 4. So we say minus 4x minus 4x, cancel, cancel. Negative y is equal to negative 4x plus 4. Then we have a negative y here, so we have to turn it into a positive y, so we turn the negative y into a positive y by dividing by negative 1. Or you can think of it in terms of there's an implied or understood negative 1 there, so y is being multiplied by a negative 1, and how do you undo the multiplication of y by a negative 1? You divide by a negative 1. That's another way to look at it. Or just simply flip all the signs. That'll work too. So you end up with y is equal to a negative 4 divided by a negative 1 is a positive 4x, or just flip the sign from a negative 4x to a positive 4x. And positive 4 divided by a negative 1 is negative 4, or just flip it from an addition of 4 to a subtraction 4. That also works. In which case we know that the slope of the first equation, this subscript is just to differentiate between the first and the second equation. Okay, so we know that the slope on this one is a positive 4. Okay, so what about the second one? We have 8x minus 2y equals negative 12. We want to get that negative 2y by itself first, so we have to undo or get rid of that positive 8x by subtracting 8x, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Those cancel out, leaving me negative 2y is equal to negative 8x minus 12. Then we undo the multiplication of y by a negative 2 by dividing by negative 2, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. And y is negative 8 divided by negative 2 is equal to positive 4. And we say negative 12 divided by negative 2 is a positive 6. Okay, so what's the slope of the second one? Well, the slope of the second one is a 4. And of course, 4 is equal to 4, so this is parallel. Parallel, right? Okay, let's try a couple more. Same kind of concept. They give us two equations. Well, the only way we're going to find out whether they're parallel or perpendicular or neither is we have to know the slopes. So we determine the slopes. So let's deal with the first one. So we have 4x plus 3y equals 6. We have to get rid of this 4x. We have to get the positive 3y by itself. So we subtract 4x, and whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So we end up with 3y is equal to negative 4x plus 6. Then we undo the multiplication of y by 3 by dividing by 3. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. These cancel out. That gives me y is equal to negative 4 thirds x, and positive 6 divided by positive 3 is plus 2. So that gives us slope is equal to negative 4 thirds. Okay. So we have the slope of the first one. I'm going to designate that one to differentiate from the other one. So now we want slope on this one right here. Well, we have 2x minus y is equal to 5. We want to get that negative y by itself. So we have to get rid of this positive 2x by subtracting 2x. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Those cancel out. That leaves me negative y is equal to negative 2x plus 5. And we don't want a negative y, we want a positive y, so we divide everything by negative 1. Or we can multiply everything by negative 1, or we can just flip all the signs. Same equivalence, right? So negative 2x turns into positive 2x, adding 5 turns into subtracting 5. At this point, what's the slope? Well, the slope is 2. So the slope over a second equation is 2. Slope of the first equation is negative 4 thirds. Well, they're obviously not equivalent because 2 is not equivalent to negative 4 thirds, so that doesn't work. But what if we multiply these together? What if we multiply those together? So we have negative 4 thirds. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. 3 times 1 is 3. I didn't get negative 1. So that's not going to work. It's not parallel. It's not perpendicular. There is no third test for neither. If it's not parallel and it's not perpendicular, it is neither or neither, depending upon your pronunciation. Okay, so we have one more example over here. Let's see. Again, we're trying to find out whether these are parallel, perpendicular. And to know that, we have to find first their slope. So we have a 5x minus y is equal to 1. And I want to get that negative y by itself, so I have to get rid of this positive 5x. I do that by subtracting 5x, and whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. That gives me negative y is equal to negative 5x plus 1. I want to flip all of these signs because I don't want negative y, I want positive y. So I'm going to divide everything by a negative 1, or just flip all the signs. It's the equivalent. So negative 5x turns into positive 5x, and plus 1 turns into minus 1. Okay, now we have a slope of 5. And to differentiate it from the other slope that's coming, I'm going to label that as slope number 1 from the first equation. Okay, so let's find the other slope. So I'm going to get rid of this positive x by subtracting x. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. That gives me negative 5y is equal to negative x minus 10. I undo the multiplication of y by negative 5 by dividing by negative 5. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. That gives me y is equal to negative 1. Well, it's a negative. There's an understood or implied. There's an understood or implied negative 1 in front of the x there. So it's actually kind of a. It was a negative divided by a negative, which turns into a positive. So now it's positive 1/5. Okay, and then we say negative 10 divided by negative 5 is plus 2. And that gives me the slope is equal to 1/5. Okay. Now, obviously 1/5 is not equivalent to 5. But what if we multiply those together? And this is the second equation. So what would happen is we would say 5. And we can put that over 1 if we want to. Multiply by 1/5 equals 1. Well, 1 is not negative 1. So they're not perpendicular. The product would have to be a negative 1. Okay? So it's not enough for them to be reciprocals. They have to be negative reciprocals. Now let's go back and double check. Make sure we didn't make any sign errors. Divide everything. Negative turns into a positive. Nope. Just looks like this is going to be another example of neither.